Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Caitlin, and for today's video we are going to be doing 22 books from my physical TBR that I want to read this year in 2022. Some of these are books that I bought from the Barnes & Noble hardback 50% off sale in December, and then some of these books I've literally had on my bookshelf for over 3 years that I've just never gotten a chance to read, but I'm going to make all of these books a priority, and at the end of the year we're going to do a recap and see if I actually read all 22 of these books. So I'm super excited for today's video, and if you haven't already, please make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and to subscribe to my YouTube channel down below. And let's get started because we have quite a handful to get through. So the first book I have for 2022 that I want to read, that I'm going to make a priority, is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. It's huge. I'm terrified of it. I picked up this book because it just seemed like everyone who's read it had such a good experience reading it. It's a super epic high fantasy. It has dragons, political and religious tensions. I think there's a little bit of romance going on. The book is split into 6 parts, and I believe there's 4 main characters that get to tell, I guess, their character story from their point of view. So I'm super interested in this, and I believe I'm going to be following a read-a-thon, or I'm going to read it with a group of people on Instagram, so hopefully that, goes through. And I think we're reading it towards the end of February or beginning of March, so I will not be reading this alone, and I think having other people reading it with me is going to help me stay accountable and help me get through this. I really want to read this book. While it is very big and very intimidating, I feel like it's going to be a solid read. I'm actually really excited for it. So yeah, this is the first book. So the next book I have is Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie, Maniscalco, and this book right here, I've seen everyone talk about it on Bookstagram specifically, but it reminds me, based off how people are talking about it, it reminds me of From Blood and Ash, and I feel like the books are going to be similar in the sense that it's no plot, just vibes, and I just feel like the romance is such a focal point of this book that I'm gonna really like it. There's demons, there's devils, there's witches summoning demons from hell. I don't know. There's a lot going on, and it seems like it's going to be really fun. I think the 3rd book is coming out in September, so I have a few months to kind of get through the series, but I'm really excited about this one. And if it is similar to From Blood and Ash, just in the sense of, like, yes, it is a fantasy, but also at the same time there is like a romance, and that seems to be the driving force of the story, I think I'm gonna like it a lot. So I'm super excited about this one, and I can't wait to read it. And based off of what, like, the fan art that fans and like readers are sharing, this book seems like it's gonna be a little hot. Okay, I think the 3rd one is like 18 plus, so this is exactly what I'm looking for. The next book I have is Iron Widow by Sharon J. Zhao. I solely picked this up because 1, the cover is absolutely gorgeous, and 2, the premise of the book sounded very interesting. It's a YA science fiction novel that has a very strong and promising female lead, and it just sounds like it's going to be a good story. I've heard a lot of positive things about this. I have seen a few negative reviews, but I'm just very intrigued by the story, and I'm very intrigued by the Chinese culture that's going to be infused within the story, and I'm super excited to read this one. The next book is This Close to Okay by Lisa Cross Smith. So this book I have literally seen not so promising and positive reviews. This book follows our main character. She finds or she sees a guy who's about to jump off a bridge, and she catches him before he jumps off the bridge, and they kind of spark some type of relationship, and she brings him home, and they start talking about, like, why he's jumping off the bridge, how did he get to this point in his life. But the kicker to the story is that the girl who finds the guy and brings him home, she's a therapist. And a lot of the critiques of the story has been because the practices that she does is very unethical, and they just don't like her, and how she approaches the situation, how she talks about the guy, how she interacts with him in general. They just don't like that. And they also, I believe she doesn't disclose to him that she's a therapist, and I don't think she's a practicing therapist. I'm pretty sure she lost her license, but I don't know. It sounded very interesting. I picked it up because I really liked the cover. I thought it was really beautiful. And then also I just read the sleeve right here, and I was like, this seems like a good one. This was one that I picked up and I didn't really read the reviews beforehand, but I'm still really intrigued by it, and I'm definitely excited to read this year. So the next book I have is a good one. I feel like this book is probably going to make it into my top favorite books of the year. I don't know. I just have a good feeling about this one. But it is The Push by Ashley Audrain. This book is a psychological thriller that explores motherhood in a very interesting and unique way, I think. I don't know too much about it. I don't know too much about any of the books, honestly, but I have seen nothing but positive reviews about this book and the way in which the author kind of starts conversations about what it means to be a good mother, what it means to be a bad mother, what it means to have a child and not be able to connect with that child as a mother. And I'm just really interested about that. And a lot of the books, not a lot, but like I think a few of the books I do pick out, they are explorations about motherhood, and they kind of do a deep dive into that theme, and I think this is going to be a really, really good one, and I'm super excited for this book. The next book I have, I'm so embarrassed that I have not read this yet. It is Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi, and it is the sequel to Children of Blood and Bone by her. I read that book so long ago. It is a YA fantasy novel that has magic and gods and is kind of an allegory for the Black experience, and it is just so good. It is infused with so much African culture, and it was one of the first books where I really saw myself as a character, and I was able to connect to a character in the sense of like I was able to relate to a character. The first book, Children of Blood and Bone, that book was fantastic. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, but I have not yet picked up the sequel just because I've been lazy. So I really want to get into it this year. I've heard that it is, I don't know, I feel like I've heard mixed things about it. My sister's read it and she said that it was a good one, so I trust her with that. I do think it is smaller than Children of Blood and Bone, so I'm really interested in it. And I know it's becoming a movie, and I know that, I don't know when the 3rd book is coming out or how long the series is, but I definitely want to just catch up so I'm not falling behind, because I tend to do that with series. But yeah, Children of Virtue and Vengeance is definitely a read for the year. The next book I have is My Dark Vanessa by Katie Elizabeth Russell. And I picked up this book because a lot of people have been talking about it. I've been watching a few booktube videos, and I forgot the girl's name. I will link it down below, but she read this book, and I think this ended up being one of her favorite books of the year. And that was kind of, I guess, the push that I needed to want to read and pick up this book. I read a book called 3 Women by Lisa Tadeo, and in that book there's a specific woman that she follows. Her name is Maggie, and her story is very similar to the story that I think is going to be talked about in this book. And her story, Maggie's story in 3 Women, was the one that I was the most interested in, but that story was based on a real person and a real situation. I kind of wished that the book kind of just stuck to her story, because again, it was the one that I was most interested in. So My Dark Vanessa is kind of me being able to see more of Maggie's story but told differently, and it's just very dark, and it's a conversation starter. It's an important story, and I'm actually very anxious to read it just because I know that it's going to upset me in a lot of ways, but I also know that it's a story that is very important, and I really want to read it. So I'm really excited to read this one. Not so much excited, more anxious to read it, but yeah, My Dark Vanessa. The next book I have is Verity by Colleen Hoover. No one shuts up about this book. I feel like It Ends With Us, Ugly Love, and then Verity. Like, those are the books that, if you are getting any recommendations for Colleen Hoover, those are the books that people are shoving down your throat, and I'm just like, I want to read it. I want to see what the hype is about. Colleen Hoover mainly writes romances, and this is catered to be a thriller book, and I'm interested to see how that goes. There is romance in here, so I'm interested to see how she kind of combines thriller and romance and mystery and everything that this book has to offer. I know that there is a manuscript that everybody goes crazy over, so I'm excited to see what that is all about. But yeah, I'm super stoked to read Verity, and the first line of the book already sold me, so I'm just super excited to read it. I don't think it's going to be too long of a read. It's only a little bit over 300 pages, so Verity is definitely on the list for 2022. The next book I have is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. It is a YA fantasy, and it is a Romeo and Juliet retelling. It's an urban fantasy, excuse me, and I'm just super stoked to read it. I'm gonna be real with you guys. I went back and forth between whether or not I wanted to pick up this book, just because I don't know, I just didn't think I was gonna like it, or I didn't think it was going to be interesting for me. But again, I'm very easily persuaded, and so many people kept talking about it. I don't know, the more I kept reading and watching reviews on it, I got more and more interested, and I think it's only a duology, so it's not like I'm going to be spending a super long time in the series if I do get hooked. But yeah, I'm super excited to read this one, and I just feel like this book is going to be very chaotic. I mean, Romeo and Juliet, that telling was chaotic in itself. And I feel like now that we're including gangs and it's an urban fantasy and we're having all of these crazy things and magic systems and all these wonderful things that come with a fantasy novel, I feel like it's just gonna be chaos, and I'm here for it because I need that in my life right now. I'm super excited to read this for the new year. The next book I have is a nonfiction. We have a few nonfictions in here, but the first nonfiction I have that I want to read in 2022 is Man Enough by Justin Baldoni. If there's anything you know about me, you know that Justin Baldoni is one of my favorite people on the internet. He is just an incredible person, and his mind and the things that he talks about and the things that he's passionate about are just so important and are just so worth giving somebody a platform to express themselves and to express those topics and start those conversations. This book is about undefining his masculinity, but I think also just taking down the barriers of traditional masculinity and actually doing a dive into how that's actually hurting not just our men but also our women and everybody around us. And I'm super stoked to read this just because I love him and I love the work that he's doing, and I feel like I'm going to be able to gain a lot from it. I'm not a man, obviously, but I also think that as a woman there is something that I think I can gain from this as well, and I will be gifting this to the men in my life once I finish reading it, because I do think that a lot of men should be reading this. The next book I have is The 9 Lives of Rose Napolitano by Donna Freda'S, and this book, first of all, cover beautiful. Another book that I bought Barnes and Nobles during their sale, and it is a book about motherhood. The main character, she's in a marriage, and originally her and her husband agreed to not have children, but he later on is like, hey, I want kids right now. And she kind of has to grapple with the fact of, okay, am I going to have children now? Am I going to change my mind? Or am I going to stick to what I said and not have children? I think it's going to be a really good story that, again, just explores motherhood in a unique way. And I haven't heard too many people talk about this book. I read the side right here, and again, I was just like, this just sounds really interesting to me. Going to be about, is it okay to be someone who is a woman and not have children? And is it okay to stand by that fact? And how is that going to affect a marriage? How is that going to affect a relationship with other people? But also, if you are a woman who said you didn't want children but now you want children, then what does that journey look like? How do you get from point A to point B? And I think that this book hopefully is going to do a good job kind of exploring that and telling that journey. The next book I have, I'm actually like so scared to read. Like, when I say I'm terrified to read this book, I'm absolutely terrified to read this book. It is White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. And this book is not a thriller, it's a horror. I don't read horror, I don't even read thrillers, I don't like mysteries. No, I'm a fantasy and romance girl. So this book is very much outside of my comfort zone, and I'm actually very much terrified to read it. But I've heard nothing but good things about it. Ambria from A Handful of Lit, she has, I haven't watched her book review on it because she did mention there were spoilers, but I did watch her reading experience. I think she posted about it on Instagram stories, and she does mention this book in a reading wrap-up of hers, and the way she just spoke about it, I'm just like, I have to read it. I just have to read it. It's just so good. There's ghosts that talk to people and try to like force this family to leave where they are because it's haunted. I don't know too much about it. I'm probably not going to read this until October because I feel like I'm really going to be in the mood to read it then. But I'm super, super anxious, yet excited, yet nervous. All of the feelings to read White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. The next book I have is actually a short one. It's very short. It is Fault Lines by Emily Itami, and I picked up this book because a Instagrammer, her name is Chanello from Interested in Black Books, she has talked a lot about this book, and I'm interested. I'm intrigued. A lot of the books that I pick up is because people talk about them on Bookstagram, and I'm like, I like you and I like your reflections and reviews, so I'm going to pick it up because you mentioned it. So that's exactly what the case is for this one. I did not know how short it was or anything, but it's a beautiful cover. And again, it's another book that explores motherhood in a very unique and a way that I'm very intrigued about. I know that the main character in this book has an affair, and I'm very curious to see how that is going to play a part in her role as a wife and her role as a mother, and if that changes how she feels about any of the roles that she plays. But yeah, I'm super excited about this one. The next one I have is Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa, Pincolla, Estes. This book right here, I picked it up because I used to watch a YouTuber, her name is Sarah K, and I don't watch her content anymore, but I used to watch her content, and she just had really unique, interesting conversations about life and spirituality and what it means to be a human on this earth. And it was just very interesting. I was very into that stuff when I was younger. I think I started watching her in high school, and she mentioned Women Who Run with the Wolves in one of her book reviews, or not her book reviews / book recommendation videos, and I picked it up because of that. It's a myths and stories of the wild woman archetype, and I just feel like there is something in this book that I'm meant to read, and there's something in this book that I know that I am going to connect with, and I really want to read it just to know like what this book has to offer and what as a woman I can gain from this book and what other women can gain from this book. And everything that I've read so far about like reviews on this book have been positive, and the reason why I want to read it specifically this year is because a girl that I follow on Instagram, her name is Nur. Are you guys getting like the trend here? I just follow people on Instagram and they mention things and I read it. But her name is Nur, and she, I believe, mentioned this book somewhere, either on her Instagram live or her stories, and that kind of reminded me that, wait a minute, I have a copy of that, so I definitely want to pick it up this year. And following the non-fiction trend, I have one more nonfiction, I think. Yeah, I have one more nonfiction, and it is Attached by Amir, Levine, and Rachel Heller. And this book is all about attachment styles. So there's 3 attachment styles. There's anxious, avoidant, and secure. And it is basically how understanding your attachment style can help you find and keep love. And I don't know the type of attachment style I have. I feel like it's definitely not secure. I'll tell you that right now. It's probably avoidant, I think, but I'm super excited to just learn more about myself and learn more about how I can, you know, break some of these attachment styles that I've built and kind of lean more towards having a more secure attachment style. Because something that I think was mentioned in this book, because I started reading it earlier but I never finished it. I think I only read like the first 10 pages. But sometimes people who are anxious or avoidantly attached, they look for people who are more secure attached, and that can actually be draining on the people who are secure attached. But I don't know, I just really want to learn more about my attachment style and learn more how to be more of a secure attached person. I'm not like super obsessed with labels, but as a psychology major, I'm interested in this stuff. So yeah. The next book I have, I got it from an Instagram giveaway, and it is Clap While You Land by Elizabeth Asabato. And first of all, again, cover gorgeous. One thing I did not know about this book is that it is written in verse. So what that means, because I don't even know what that means, but I googled it earlier. It means that the book is written in poetry rather than your usual sentences and paragraphs, and I don't like poetry, so I don't know how I'm gonna feel. But the premise of this book is interesting, and I've heard a lot of good things about this book, and I really want to get into Elizabeth's work as an author, and I feel like this is a good place to start, I think, and I hope. But we'll see how that goes when I finally get into it. But yeah, I've had it for a hot minute, and I definitely want to read it this year. The next book I have, technically I've already read it, but I haven't reread it, and I want to reread it this year. Anyways, it's Gone series by Michael Grant. I'm sorry, I want to read the entire series this year. However, if I can just read the first book, I'll be fine. I have the entire series back here on my bookshelf, but I talk about this book any chance that I get. It is hands down, like, it is my Harry Potter, it is my Hunger Games, it is my Mortal Instruments. It's my Percy Jackson. You know, I never read any of those books, but the Gone series by Michael Grant, I will stand by these books. This is a hill I am willing to die on. Wonderful. This man and this series, choke hold, okay? It's so good. So I definitely want to reread these books in the new year, but at least if I can't reread all of them, I do want to start with Gone. Forgot how big and hefty these books are, but I'm just Sam Temple, Astrid, Diana, I'm just little Pete. I want to go back. I want to be happy, okay? I want to heal my inner child. And I feel like going back and rereading this will just make me a happier person in 2022. The next book I have, this is probably the book in this entire video that I'm like the least excited to read, but I know that I have to read it because at this point it's getting ridiculous and I'm tired of this book being on my bookshelf. I almost included it in my book on haul, but I was like, no, Caitlin, you're 22 years old, you can grow up. So the next book I have is After You by Jojo Moyes. It is the sequel to Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. Me Before You kickstarted my love for adult romances, and Me Before You is hands down my favorite romance I've ever read. It is such an incredible book. However, how the story ended has prevented me from picking up After You, just because I just am not emotionally prepared to continue the story. And I know there's one more book after You, so it's a 3-book series, and I want to finish it because I love the characters so much and I love the story so much. The rest of the series looks different based off how the first book ended, and I've just been too scared to continue reading, but again, I'm grown, I can do it, and I'm going to force myself to read it because I want to know. I'm interested enough to want to know. And someone told me on Instagram that it's not as bad as I think it's going to be, but Me Before You made me cry. It was the first book that made me cry to the point where I was like, yeah, my heart's broken. I haven't gotten myself back up to reading this book, but I'm gonna do it. The next book I have is The Vanishing Half by Britt. And this book took over Bookstagram, took over the book community. This book was everywhere. Like, it was, I'm pretty sure the author ended up on Good Morning America, but I have been dying to read this book, and I don't know why it's taken me so long to read it. Again, when it comes to my TBR, I just start getting books from the library, and I just get books on my Kindle now that I have a Kindle, and everything else kind of just, I forget things. But I was going through my bookshelves and I saw this and I was like, I have to read this year. Like, there is no excuses anymore. So from what I understand, The Vanishing Half is about two sisters, and they are estranged sisters, so they don't communicate or talk to each other anymore. And one lives a life passing as a white woman, and one lives a life not passing as a white woman, and she is, I believe, is in a abusive relationship. And their daughters start talking to each other, and that is how the two sisters kind of come back together and reunite. That is all I know about the book. But I do know the book tackles a lot of heavy themes such as colorism and family dynamics and racism. I believe the book is set in the 1950s to the 1990s. So a lot of like conversations are going to be going around probably about Jim Crow. I've heard more positive than negative things about this book, which is nice. But yeah, I'm super stoked to read it, and it is definitely going to be a read for 2022, and I think that it might be like one of my favorite books of 2022. I feel it in my bones, and I'm usually never wrong. We got 3 books left, y'all. We got 3 books left. The next book I have, after reading all of the reviews about this book, I have not seen a single positive one, and I didn't know that when I bought the book, because I read the premise and I saw the cover and I was like, oh, the book is going to be great. Especially like all the Black women specifically that I've seen review this book do not like it. So I'm just like, should I even read it? But I'm curious and I want to know why they don't like it, and I want to be able to add to the conversation. So it is The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Delilah Harris. I don't know too much about what this book is about. Okay, someone's an editorial assistant. She's the only Black girl working, and then another Black girl comes, and I think they might be enemies. And one Black girl I think is more quote-unquote professional than the other, and that causes struggles and what it means to be a Black woman largely in a white industry. I literally am just reading the sleeve because I don't really know what it's about, but it just sounded really good. But again, no one said anything positive about it, so I'm very interested to see how I'm gonna feel about the book when I read it. I'm super excited to add my voice to the conversation once I read this book. The next book I have is Against the Loveless World by Susan Abuhawa, and I picked up this book at the Barnes & Noble's book sale, and this is a book that I picked up again. I did not read any reviews on it. I solely just read the sleeve, and I was like, I need to read this book. But it is a lyrical novel that follows a young Palestinian refuge as she searches for a meaning to survive the midst of revolutionary turmoil. And it's very richly detailed, beautiful, and resonant, and very gripping, and all of the reviews that I've read so far about this book have said the exact same thing. So Against the Loveless World, I am super excited to read you. Oh my gosh, I did not think how long this video was actually going to be, but I'm at the last book that I want to read from my physical TBR in 2022, and that is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. I picked up this book because the cover was amazing. I wish this book was around when I was in middle school, because I would have died, because first of all, I mean, just looking at the cover, I just felt drawn to it, and I was like, wow, you know. And literally almost sold out in Barnes and Nobles. Like, everybody was taking the book, so I was like, obviously it's a good book. But it is a middle grade, and I haven't read middle grade since I was in middle school. So I'm very interested to see how I'm going to like this one, but it just seems very promising. The premise sounded very cool. The main character finds out that her missing brother, Quentin, is still alive, and I guess she goes on a quest to find him and finds out that she is just a badass and she is just super cool and dope, and I guess we kind of follow that journey. So I'm super excited to read this one for sure. I have a good feeling that I'm going to enjoy this one a lot. So that is it. Those are all the books all the 22 books that I want to read this year in 2022. If any of these books are on your list to read in 2022, please let me know. Please let me know at least one book from your physical TBR that you want to read in the year of 2022. Drop them all down below in the comments down below. Okay, I'm still getting used to this whole YouTube thing, but if you enjoyed today's video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Please make sure to follow me on Bookstagram at Caitlin Talks, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.